Hi, everyone. I'm Ginny Grinevitch. I'm a retired chemistry teacher living in southern Alberta on the eastern slopes of the Rocky Mountains. I'm quite nervous to do this, but I love reading and talking about books. I fell in love with Anthony Trollope about 25 years ago and have read and researched and conversed about his books ever since. So here are some of my thoughts on an unprotected female at the pyramids. In 1857, a young woman named Emily Lowe published a book called Unprotected Females in Norway, or the Pleasantest Way of Traveling There, Passing Through Denmark and Sweden. It was the tale of her travels to those places with her mother. Apparently, the book was quite popular in its day. If you search the internet for this book today, probably the only passage you will find is this one, quote, "We two ladies have found out and will maintain that ladies alone get on in traveling much better than with gentlemen. The only use of a gentleman in traveling is to look after the luggage, and we take care to have no luggage. The unprotected should never go beyond one portable carpet bag." Knowing Mr. Trollope as we do, we can imagine his thoughts on this claim. To add insult to injury, early in 1859, Miss Lowe published her second travelogue with the title Unprotected Females in Sicily, Calabria, and on top of Mount Etna. The political situation at this time in the south of what was not yet Italy was unsettled, to say the least, and the journey of two English women unaccompanied by men would have been extraordinary and exotic. Emily Lowe was an object of much attention in the press of her day for her two travel books, which were mostly received with delighted reviews. Why would Mr. Trollope write a story using the title An Unprotected Female at the Pyramids? He was satirizing the independent female traveler, of whom he obviously disapproved. But I suspect he also hoped to capitalize on the popularity of these books. Mr. Trollope gives Miss Lowe no credit for borrowing her title, although he does have the bold, audacious, and cheeky Miss Dawkins reference another lady traveler, Ida Pfeiffer, described by Wikipedia as, quote, an Austrian explorer, travel writer, and ethnographer. She was one of the first female travelers whose best-selling journals were translated into 7 languages. She journeyed an estimated 32,000 kilometers by land and 240,000 kilometers by sea through Southeast Asia, the Americas, Middle East, and Africa, including 2 trips around the world from 1846 to 1855. But the unprotected female in this story, Miss Sabrina Dawkins, did not intend to rival Ida Pfeiffer, seeing that she was attached in a moderate way to bed and board and was attached to society in a manner almost more than moderate. That's a quote from the story. But she was determined to see everything she wished to see, even though she had no man to protect her. She has attached herself to Mr. Damer's family excursion to see the pyramids, along with 2 unprotected or single men. A Frenchman, Mr. Delabordeaux, a Suez Canal enthusiast, and a young, good-looking American on a world tour, Mr. Jefferson Ingram. Miss Dawkins is described 2 or 3 times as, quote, an old soldier. This is definitely not a compliment, meaning it means a person who uses their greater age or experience of life to deceive someone or shirk a duty. And Miss Dawkins both deceives and shirks. Mrs. Damer makes a point, perhaps inadvertently, that Miss Dawkins is no lady. It was a general belief in the 19th century that you could not be both a real lady and a real traveler, and this is emphasized in this story. The story begins with an arduous and comical journey to the foot of the pyramids featuring poor Miss Damer's donkey riding. Quote, oh dear, this animal does hurt me so. Every time he moves, he flings his head about and gives me such a bump. Majestic piles, are they not? Said Miss Dawkins, referring to the pyramids, of course. After fraught negotiations with Arab guides, hideous brown, shrieking, stinky, one-eyed Arabs, most of the party climbs to the top of a pyramid. There, Miss Dawkins makes two proposals, one to Mr. Damer and then another to Mr. Della Bordeaux, asking to join them on their next excursions. Mr. Ingram makes one intense proposal, a proposal of marriage to Miss Damer, but only after he drives away the beggars by striking, quote, first one and then the other as violently as he could upon their heads. One of the strangest proposals I've ever read about. Miss Dawkins fails, absolutely, but Mr. Ingram is successful. Returning to the base of the pyramid, lunch is a bit of a failure, and Miss Dawkins has to do all the talking. After lunch, Miss Dawkins joins the men for a crawl into the pyramid, confirming that she is no lady. They all make their very tired way back to the hotel. A happy ending for the marriage plot, but unhappily, Miss Dawkins remains single, an unprotected female still. Mr. Trollope is very hard on the three women in this story. Mrs. Damer is a pitiable clown. Miss Damer is a very proper but uninteresting ingenue. But Miss Dawkins is an eccentric fool, a sponger, and a bore. Victoria Glendinning, in her biography of Trollope, says, quote, this was the young Trollope speaking. Solitary travel was to change his ideas. She refers to A Ride Across Palestine, our next story, and a sketch entitled The Unprotected Female Tourist as evidence for Trollope's increasing admiration and attraction to single female travelers. I tracked down the sketch, and here Trollope certainly does express admiration. This is a quote from the sketch, An Unprotected Female Tourist. For myself, I have always liked the company of the unprotected female and have generally felt something like the disruption of a tender friendship when circumstances have torn me from her. Sounds almost a little bit suspicious there. And yet he ends the piece by claiming that unprotected females, as they travel, acquire, quote, a cold exterior glaze, unquote, such that no man will ever want to marry them. They are doomed to become old soldiers, wise in the way of using and deceiving their fellow travelers. Winding up, I couldn't help comparing Trollope's short stories to his novels. I found I was not engaged with these two stories the way I almost always am with the novels. This quote from a review of Tales of All Countries in The Spectator, May 7th, 1863, quote, he is not great except when he can make a real friend of his characters, when he can indulge himself in putting them through their paces gradually, when all effort at concentration is out of the question, unquote. I do agree with this reviewer. Trollope is at his best when he can thread bits and pieces of a character through the bigger tapestry. For example, I'm sure Miss Damer would have become more vivid and less vapid in a novel, and hopefully Miss Dawkins would have been less of a caricature. Sadly, the unsympathetic, really quite offensive descriptions of the local guides probably would have not improved. Thanks. I hope I've got a few conversation starters here.
Thank you, Ginny.